Hey everyone, this is a clip from a recent episode of Another Pass, where we talk about movies and all the struggles that go into making them. If you like it, check out the whole podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Today, we are continuing our trek through so many weird anthropomorphic animal movies. You thought we would be done after the Planet of the Apes. You thought we'd be done after Ninja Turtles 2.
You were wrong.
But today, we kind of have the father of them all.
The piece de resistance.
Today we are talking about the 1996 adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau. And for that conversation, we are joined by Micah McCaw.
Hello. I'm happy to visit the island and potentially come back a little less man and a little more animal.
And definitely less sane.
Absolutely.
For anyone involved either in the movie itself or the production as a whole, a little less sane is definitely the response.
I actually think that the great thing about this movie is that the trivia is almost more fun than the movie. And I was like, wow, there's just so much that happened behind the scenes. And this movie is a train wreck, partially because of all of that bullshit.
Like obviously this movie was always going to be on our list of movies to talk about at some point because it's just such a weird fucking movie. But it's also the kind of movie where you're like, well, the fact that a movie actually was made almost makes this a fifth episode kind of movie because it's just like, holy shit, this thing actually got into theaters. And every step of the way you're like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And then somehow it made it to theaters. I remember seeing commercials. I remember watching behind the scenes featurettes on this movie. I was excited for this movie when it came out.
Did you see this movie in the theaters?
I didn't see it in theaters, but I did see it shortly after on home video. Because this was 1996, so I was 12. And I probably could have gotten away with it because they ultimately, I think, did end up with a PG-13 rating. But that doesn't mean that my parents were itching to take me to see it at the time.
Yeah, my parents had no interest in this film, so we did not see this.
I have to say, of all of the things that I'd heard about this movie, the Marlon Brando of it all, the Val Kilmer of it all, bad weather, all of this stuff, the most surprising thing to me was I was not expecting there to be an orgy scene in this movie.
Right.
And I was it's not really graphic in any way, but I was sort of dumbfounded. I was already dumbfounded, and then when it got to that point, I was just like, what is going on? This is one of the wildest movies maybe ever.
Yeah. So for people not familiar with this property, this is
you really should watch it. It's crazy, people.
I think just for the value of being like, well, that was really weird.
That was an experience, for sure.
But this is based on an 1896 novel by H.G. Wells, and is kind of the prototype example of mad scientists with a bunch of experiments on an island, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
In the way that H.G. Wells is kind of the prototype for a lot of specific types of stories that aren't really of themselves truly groundbreaking in terms of War of the Worlds is what if the colonizers were not us? Which is, I know, a huge innovation for the British. And in this case, it's what if the subhuman creatures weren't us just treating real humans as subhuman, but actual animals that we're then converting? And so there's a lot of stuff going on in that book. And what I will say is that it's interesting looking at this movie because the story itself is actually fairly basic when you get down to it, where it's all right, we've got a mad scientist off away, an outsider shows up and is forced to observe the workings of the mad scientist. And then the experiments all go awry and everyone has to flee to survive. That's the basic idea of it, which is kind of a bog standard sci-fi monster movie kind of trope. And in this case, it's here's a whole island of our beast men who decided to go back to being beasts because we are monsters to them. We have done terrible stuff. But man, the actual way it's put on screen here is just a lot. The whole thing is just I don't even know what to say. So I'm kind of flabbergasted.
Honestly, this movie has such a it has such a feel of like, it's not even twisty and turny, but it makes your brain feel like you don't even know where to begin. Like if I had to describe this film to someone, even though the concept is really basic, right? It's like super basic. I mean, and we've seen it replicated in like thousands of other monster movies. I mean, you could even argue that somewhat Jurassic Park kind of takes same beats, right? Like experiment goes, it's a wondrous experiment. Although there it's more wondrous, right? But it's giant beasts and it's just the scientist that thinks, yeah, we're doing this thing that's amazing, and then everything goes wrong and people have to escape the thing that went wrong, right? Totally basic. We've seen this over and over and over again. But somehow trying to think about a timeline for this, or if I had to make an outline to explain this to a class, I would be like, wait, I forgot. Wait, I have to go back. Towards, because like Val Kilmer, like he finds him in the middle of the ocean, but this might have been set up, so I don't know if they shot down the plane, but that's not the point. So anyway, so they find him in the ocean, and then there's like this little pygmy guy, and he plays piano with Marlon Brando, and then and it just like forever. Oh, and then there's Marlon Brando's daughter, and I just feel like my brain was mush after this. Like I would like literally looked at my notes and I was like, they make no sense. Just like this movie.
Yeah, and you describing the plot just now kind of was me going, oh, okay, that was the plot of the movie.
Remember, if you like that clip, check out the podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.